Welcome to Act 4 of Deconstructing Directing, Text, Playwrights, and Dramaturgy. I'm Andrew Robler, the founder and archivist here. Regardless of your level of experience as a director, I am so happy that you're here, and I hope that you find the content in Act 4 to be illuminating. First, a quick review of the 3 acts that preceded this one. It's okay if you haven't explored them yet, this is just to put Act 4 in context. In Act 1, Defining Directing, we explored the flame paradigm for directing, a groundbreaking new definition for the role of a director that has pushed us to get specific about what exactly it is that directors do in order to help us do it more effectively. Act 2, titled Our Directing Identity, drove us to look at who we are as individual directors and examine how our identities impact the work that we do, from developing our artistic taste to navigating power dynamics and even our own nervous system. Act 3, Directing with Kindness, explored 7 different types of common issues directors face and encouraged us to see them through the lens of another groundbreaking paradigm, reckless kindness. And now, here in Act 4, we are going to dive into the foundation of most Western theater, the script, along with exploring how we work with the people whose roles are based on it, playwrights and dramaturgs. Here in Scene 1, we're going to talk more broadly about this topic and the why of script analysis. And in Scene 2, we'll introduce you to a variety of script analysis approaches and tool sets. So, let's start with that exact question. Why analyze a script? Well, if you've been following along with Deconstructing Directing from Act 1, then you know that one of our key tools for facilitation and translating between our different artistic languages is specificity. And that means defining our terms. According to the Oxford Languages Dictionary, to analyze something means to examine methodically and in detail the constitution or structure of something, especially information, typically for purposes of explanation and interpretation. There are a few terms that jump out to me that I want to highlight. The first is examine methodically and in detail. This suggests that analysis requires intentionality. That doesn't mean that we can't intuitively understand something in a script, but we wouldn't call that analysis. The second phrase that jumps out is that analysis is typically for the purposes of explanation and interpretation. So we don't just analyze in a vacuum just to say that we've done it. We analyze something because we want to better explain or interpret it. It's strategic. Many of us may have memories of high school English class where we were asked to analyze poetry and literature. If those memories are negative, it's likely that we never really understood the why behind the analysis we were being instructed to do, and thus the analysis likely felt arbitrary or forced. If you had the chance to attend an undergraduate or graduate theater program, then you probably had at least one class that focused on script analysis, likely teaching a particular approach, and this analysis was graded, perhaps based in part on what the instructor saw as the right interpretation. This is not to say that everyone had these experiences. Many of us may have had excellent high school or college instructors who helped us understand the why and didn't penalize us for interpretations that didn't align with theirs. But even if we had a positive experience, I'm willing to bet that we're all familiar with, and thus have partially internalized, several assumed rules about analyzing a piece of text like a script. So I want to address these head on. There isn't only one right way of doing script analysis. Script analysis is not a badge of intellect. It's not something we do because we're supposed to. Script analysis is a tool, a strategy to help us reach a goal and nothing more. There's nothing mystical or magical about script analysis, though sometimes it can feel that way, especially when we have a realization that we weren't expecting. Recognizing that it's a strategy is a start, but strategy isn't worth anything unless we know what that strategy is helping us to achieve. In this vein, I have news that is exciting, but can be overwhelming. And there are at least 8 different goals that script analysis can help us achieve. But fear not, we're going to explore them together. And as usual, there will be a handout below to help you in your own analysis goal setting. And as with so much related to art, this is not a zero-sum game. There's a lot of overlap and interplay between these goals, so don't feel like you have to analyze a text 8 different times in order to accomplish them. All right, goal number 1, structural understanding. This is perhaps the goal that is the closest to those text analysis assignments we did in high school and or college, but the why here is always about helping us better understand the writer's approach to structure as it is before we start to interpret it more fully. Analyzing a script with this goal in mind can help us to identify the arc of the story. Is it linear, episodic, cyclical, modular, etc.? Understand pacing, tempo, and rhythm. Recognize key turning points or turns. Break down the play into beats, scenes, or units. Detect setups and payoffs across the play. Map character entrances, exits, and presence on stage. This is especially helpful when designing rehearsal schedules. Goal 2 is about developing vision and/or concept. This goal is centered around much of the work that most folks see as the core of a director's role. Analysis with this goal in mind might help to identify dominant metaphors or symbols, establish tone, mood, or the aesthetic of the world, uncover a directorial point of view or argument, shape the conceptual frame or container for the piece, or determine genre, style, or convention, like realism versus stylized abstraction. Goal number 3, navigating adaptation or interpretation. This is quite literally the core of the definition of analysis, as we discussed earlier. Analysis with this goal in mind might help us understand how this production might differ from the author's original intent, justify cuts, rearrangements, or recontextualizations when we are working with a playwright or a text in the public domain. We'll discuss copyright later in this act. Consider cultural specificity and context. Locate what must be preserved versus what can be transformed. Frame ethical or representational concerns, especially for older or problematic texts, or distill text into playable, embodied actions. And this is especially valuable when working with actors. Goal number 4 is audience experience shaping. The A in FLAME is artistic insight and taste. And as we discussed in Act 1, Scene 4, often that means that as the director, we are the audience surrogate. It's our responsibility to try and understand what the audience's experience of a piece will be so that we can help to ensure that the team's goals are being met. Analysis for this purpose can help us clarify what we want the audience to notice or feel, determine how meaning accumulates across the performance, shape pacing to manage audience attention and engagement, identify moments of surprise, tension, catharsis, or ambiguity, or control the flow of information. What does the audience know and when? Goal 5 is supporting our team. Both facilitation and education/mentorship are part of our FLAME paradigm. Check out Act 1 if you aren't familiar with this yet. And analyzing a text can be a valuable tool in supporting our fellow artists. Note that this analysis is not something we should do in isolation, but often in community. Analyzing text in this way helps us support actors by clarifying character objectives, tactics, and actions, tracing character arcs or emotional journeys, identifying obstacles in given circumstances, helping actors navigate shifts in status, tone, or dynamics, translating abstract ideas into playable actions, locating subtext and inner life, or anticipating common questions actors may ask. For our designers and production team, this analysis might help us identify recurring imagery or motifs for design inspiration, determine practical and metaphorical demands of the set, suggest sound, light, and costume palettes through tone or theme, understand world-building requirements, for example, realism versus surrealism, coordinate time period, setting, and visual metaphor, or translate the rhythm and structure of the script into cues or transitions. Goal 6 is rehearsal planning. We touched on this at the end of Goal 1, but in addition to understanding who's on stage when, there are several other ways that analyzing text can help us prepare for rehearsals. It can allow us to prioritize which scenes or moments require the most attention, identify likely staging challenges or moments of potential confusion, determine rehearsal order based on complexity or emotional weight, plan exercises or explorations tied to analytical insights, or find points for actor input or experimentation. Goal 7 is ensemble and collaboration building. Now, this falls squarely within the part of our job that is facilitation. By analyzing a text with this goal in mind, we can build a shared vocabulary for themes and character arcs, offer actors and designers a common set of reference points, identify values or provocations that can unite the team, set the tone for the rehearsal culture. Is it investigative versus prescriptive? Or guide table work discussions and discoveries. And last but not least, Goal 8, identifying theatrical opportunities. This goal is about putting everything into practice. Analysis with this goal in mind allows us to spot physicality or spatial dynamics in the text, find movement-based cues or transitions, imagine heightened or nonverbal sequences, or recognize opportunities for musical, choreographic, or multimedia layers. To help demonstrate the ways that these goals come into play, let me share a case study with you. In the fall of 2022, I was approached by a colleague with the opportunity to direct a production of Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare, a play that I had previously acted in once and directed on 2 other occasions. While I was excited by the opportunity to support my friend, I wasn't sure that there was anything that interested me about the play after having engaged with it in 3 prior productions. So I sat down to read the play, primarily with goals 2, developing vision and/or concept, and 3, navigating adaptation or interpretation, in mind. Having engaged with the play previously, I felt pretty comfortable with the structural qualities of it, so goal 1 wasn't really on my mind. Reading the play with these goals in mind, I went looking for any metaphors or symbols I might see in a new way, or what cultural specificity could offer to the story. I found myself focusing on 2 elements of the story, one that really bothered me and one that presented a challenge for staging this production. First, I was reminded how much I disliked that the character of Hero felt more like a plot device than an actual person. She had no agency, and her choice to accept Claudio at the end despite his horrible behavior towards her felt unearned. I began wondering how we could tell the story in a way that didn't change the text, but allowed Hero more agency. Second, I was challenged by the overall context of the story, namely that half of the characters are returning from a war. I knew that the budget for the show was incredibly small, and period costumes were almost completely out of the question. So setting it as soldiers returning from a modern war, like in the Middle East, felt overly political and didn't bring me much excitement. It was in considering this that my eye was drawn to Leonato's invitation for them to stay at his home for an extended period. While this was much more common among the landed aristocracy during the time Shakespeare was alive, it is less common in our society, except that we were coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people I knew were invited to bubble up with friends and family so that they wouldn't be alone. All of a sudden, I began to see medical professionals as the soldiers and the fight against COVID as the war. And thus, the invitation from Leonato to bubble up at his house made perfect sense in a modern context without changing the text. This was all from a single read of the text, but with 2 specific goals in mind. I would continue to explore the text with different goals in mind, but it was this initial analysis that got me excited about the play again and served as the foundation for our production. Set it as a modern COVID-era tale and approach the story with the assumption that Hero has agency, and each decision she makes has to be justifiable for her character. These goals, after all, are actionable. We're not just analyzing to analyze, we are analyzing with the goal of putting that analysis into practice. This is the principle that script analysis needs to serve the stage, not the page. Sometimes when we get too in the script analysis weeds, we can lose sight of this. The choice to use war as a metaphor for COVID is only helpful if we can communicate that to the audience in some way. Just knowing that when we say the word war, we mean something else does nothing if it doesn't translate on stage. Another common misstep we can make as directors is prioritizing our own cleverness over clarity. This often happens because we forget that a script is meant to be performed, not read silently in our minds. In this way, sometimes the text doesn't fully reveal itself until it is performed at a table read or in a rehearsal room. And this is why analysis is never a one-and-done tool. It's something that we can and should return to throughout the process. This is also why there is no one right way to analyze a piece of text. In Scene 2, we're going to dive into a number of different script analysis perspectives and techniques, but I'll quickly introduce some of the broader frames to whet your appetite. Intellectual analysis is likely most of what you are familiar with in Western theater and academia, using our minds to make sense and meaning of the text. Embodied analyses are ways of analyzing text using our bodies in space. Viewpoints is perhaps one of the most well-known in the West, but concepts like rasa from Indian aesthetics might apply here as well, though this could also be considered another type of analysis, aesthetic or design-based analysis. And finally, cultural or communal analysis, such as oral traditions of storytelling and analysis from all over the world, prioritizes analysis through conversation, relationship, and community. If you've ever met someone who gets really excited about a new tool, like, say, a chainsaw, and starts looking for every opportunity to use it, then you know that focusing too much on the tool over the job the tool is there to do can be problematic and sometimes even dangerous. Similarly, Regardless of the type of analysis we perform, it is very possible to get so bogged down in the analysis that we lose sight of why we are doing it. This often happens because we either try to achieve too many of the goals we discussed earlier at one time, or we approach them at a time that isn't helpful. For instance, if we jump to analyzing text to support actors before we've even had auditions, we may be preventing ourselves from being open to what the actors that audition bring to the table. I have more than once significantly changed my approach to a concept or vision because of what an actor did in auditions and callbacks. And if I had done all of my character level analysis prior to casting them, I likely would have overlooked them or tried to force them into the mold that I had already created in my head, which sets us both up for frustration and resentment in the future. I had analyzed the text, to be sure, and I didn't change the overall concept, which I had already communicated to the design team because of what they brought to the table, but I did significantly alter the way we approached that in terms of the rest of the casting and the staging. Down below, we have some worksheets that will help you explore each goal we discussed. Remember, analysis is a tool, and the information it gives us can always shift and change. And it needs to serve the stage, not the page. So now that we've laid the groundwork for why and how analysis can support us as directors, we'll explore some of the most common approaches in Scene 2. As always, this content is truly and completely 100% free to you and will always be as long as I can help it. That said, if you find it helpful and are able to support it financially, please consider joining my Patreon, which will allow you to set up a small monthly donation and earn fun perks like stickers and more for helping to support this project financially. Even just $5 a month makes a huge difference. I'll see you again when you're ready to dive into the rest of Act 4. Until then, I challenge us all to be recklessly kind.